The hallway stretched longer each time she blinked. The thought surfaced before the fear did, like a fact remembered rather than discovered. Mara stood barefoot at the threshold of her bedroom, the house quiet enough to hear the old clock downstairs counting seconds with patient cruelty. The dream she'd woken from clung to her like a smell, corridors folding in on themselves, doors breathing softly, but its details slid away whenever she tried to grasp them. Her mouth tasted of dust. The air felt wrong, heavier than it should have been, as if the house had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. She rubbed her eyes. When she opened them again, the hallway was longer. It had always been narrow, paneled in dark wood polished by decades of passing hands. Tonight it extended beyond the familiar bend near the linen closet, stretching into a dimness that seemed to drink the light spilling from her bedroom. The walls leaned inward at a subtle angle, not enough to notice unless you were looking for it. Mara's heart thudded, steady but loud in her ears. Sleepwalking, she thought, or still dreaming. She took one step forward. The floorboard creaked beneath her weight, a sound too sharp for the silence around it. The noise traveled down the hall and came back altered, stretched thin like taffy. Shadows shifted in response, sliding along the walls as if adjusting to a new geometry. She swallowed and blinked again, deliberately this time. The hallway lengthened. The pressure in the air changed, popping softly in her ears, as though she'd descended a few feet underwater. The nearest door, once her study, was farther away now, its brass handle smaller, dulled by distance. The framed photographs that used to line the wall appeared closer than they should have been, hovering at odd intervals, their glass catching reflections that didn't match her movements. "Okay," she whispered, testing the sound. It didn't travel far, fell at her feet and stayed there. She advanced step by careful step. Each movement brought a new creak, each creak a small betrayal. She passed the first picture frame and glanced at it, expecting a familiar family portrait. Instead, the image showed the hallway itself, empty and well-lit, as if taken during the day. In the photograph, the walls were straight. The air looked normal. Mara reached out, then stopped herself. Her fingers tingled, as if already numb. A blink, reflexive, unthinking. The hall stretched again. Now the study door was gone entirely, replaced by uninterrupted paneling. In its place stood a narrow window she had never seen before, its glass fogged from the outside. Beyond it lay a landscape that made no sense. A shoreline under a violet sky, waves frozen mid-break as if paused. The clock downstairs stopped ticking. Mara's breath came shallow. She pressed her palm to the wall, feeling the vibration of the house beneath her skin, a low, almost imperceptible hum. The air smelled faintly of old paper and rain. She remembered, abruptly, being a child in this house, lying awake and listening to the hallway at night, convinced it grew longer after bedtime, stretching to keep her from her parents' room. She had told herself then that it was just darkness playing tricks. Another blink. The ceiling arched higher, lamps receding like stars. The hallway bent, not sharply but with a gentle curve that suggested it went on far longer than any straight line could allow. Doors appeared and vanished between steps. One moment a guest room, the next a blank wall, the next a doorframe opening onto a stairwell that descended into fog. Objects crept closer. A side table that had once been near the stairs now loomed at her elbow, its drawer slightly open, revealing nothing but shadow. She forced herself to keep her eyes open, lids burning. The effort made tears pool, blurring her vision. The hallway wavered but did not change. Relief fluttered, fragile. She exhaled slowly and took another step. The floor dipped. The hum grew louder. Mara's gaze snagged on something at the far end. A shape, indistinct, darker than the surrounding dark. It might have been a coat rack or a person standing very still. Distance made it impossible to tell. She leaned forward, squinting. Her eyes betrayed her with a blink. The hallway surged outward like a lung filling with air. The shape at the end remained the same size. Understanding crept in, cold and unwelcome. The hall wasn't growing away from her. She was being repositioned, held at a fixed point while everything else rearranged itself around her. The closer she tried to get, the more space inserted itself between her and whatever waited there. A door appeared at her side, familiar at last, her bedroom. Light spilled from beneath it, warm and reassuring. She reached for the handle, desperate, and her fingers closed on empty air. The door thinned, stretched, and slid away into the wall like a thought she could almost remember. Panic threatened to bloom, but something else pushed it down. A sense of recognition. The hallway felt attentive now, the way a listener leans in. The hum resolved into a rhythm that matched her breathing. She realized with a sick lurch that the pressure changes coincided with her blinks, her heartbeat, her awareness itself. "This is me," she murmured. The words steadied her. "This is my head." She recalled the dream more clearly then. Walking a corridor that lengthened because she was afraid to reach the end, because something waited there that she could not face. The house had learned the trick from her, learned how to stretch time and space to delay an inevitable meeting. Mara closed her eyes. The hallway contracted, not fully, but enough that the end drew nearer. The shape resolved into a doorway, unadorned, its frame pulsing faintly. She understood what lay beyond without seeing it. A room without angles or exits, where the thoughts she avoided gathered and waited, patient as the ticking clock that had taught her how long a second could be. She opened her eyes and walked. With each step, the hall tried to lengthen, but she did not blink. Tears streamed freely now, vision tunneling, but she kept going. The air grew lighter, thinner. The hum softened into silence. When she reached the doorway, the hallway shuddered, resisting. Mara stepped through anyway. Behind her, the corridor snapped back to its original length, doors and windows settling into place, photographs reverting to their proper images. In the quiet house, the clock downstairs resumed its count. At the end of the hallway, something that had been waiting for her for years finally blinked, and the door closed. His name was carved into the ceiling beams. He'd never been here before. The sentence formed in his mind with an odd certainty, as if it had been waiting for words. Elias stood in the middle of the upstairs bedroom, neck craned, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The beam of light traced the thick wooden rafters overhead, old-growth timber darkened by age and smoke. The air smelled of dust, pine sap, and something faintly metallic, like rain caught in iron. He lowered the light, blinked, then raised it again. The name was still there. Elias Morrow, carved deep into the beam, each letter uneven, gouged by a blade that must have been sharp once and patient always. The cuts were dark with age. This wasn't recent vandalism. This was decades old, maybe more. His heart thumped harder, the sound swallowed instantly by the house. No echo, no comforting return of noise, just quiet, dense and pressing like insulation packed behind the walls. He had inherited the place 2 weeks earlier from a great-aunt he barely remembered. The lawyer had called it a remote property with limited records, said it like an apology. Elias had come out of obligation, planning to look it over once, lock it up, and sell it to someone who liked isolation more than he did. He had never been here before. He was sure of that, certain in the way you're certain of your own height or the spelling of your last name. And yet the ceiling beam argued otherwise, silently and confidently. The house creaked as if adjusting to his stillness. Wood popped somewhere deep in the walls. The flashlight flickered, not quite failing, just dimming enough to make the shadows loosen and stretch. Elias backed out of the bedroom slowly. The hallway beyond felt wrong. Too long for the size of the house he'd walked through earlier. The floorboards dipped subtly near the center, like the structure had sagged under a weight it no longer carried. Every step produced a soft groan, as though the house objected to being reminded of his presence. He told himself it was stress, fatigue. The drive had been long, the road narrowing into gravel miles before the cabin appeared through the trees. He'd arrived near dusk, the forest swallowing sound so completely that shutting off the engine had felt like stepping into vacuum. Downstairs, the living room smelled of cold ash and old fabric. A fireplace squatted against the far wall, its stones blackened. Elias could swear it had been clean when he arrived. Now, fine soot dusted the hearth, as if a fire had recently burned and erased itself. He walked toward the mantel and stopped. A framed photograph sat there, one he did not remember unpacking. The image showed a young boy standing in front of this very cabin, smiling awkwardly at the camera. The boy's face was unfamiliar at first glance, but something in the eyes snagged at him. The tilt of the head, the faint scar at the brow. Elias's breath caught. It was him, younger, by at least 10 years. "No," he whispered. The word fell flat, absorbed by the room. Even his own voice sounded wrong here, too small for the space it occupied. He turned away from the photograph, pulse climbing, and caught his reflection in the darkened window. For a moment it didn't move when he did. His reflection stared straight ahead while Elias shifted, raising his hand slowly. Then the reflection smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated, just enough to suggest familiarity. Elias stumbled back, colliding with a chair that scraped loudly across the floor. The sound seemed to travel farther than it should have, echoing up the staircase, into the ceiling beams, into places he hadn't seen yet. The smile in the glass was gone. His reflection matched him again, pale and shaken. He checked the rest of the house with growing dread. Doors opened onto rooms that felt subtly misaligned, corners that weren't square, ceilings that slanted when he wasn't looking directly at them. A narrow storage room off the kitchen felt too deep, extending back farther than the exterior wall should allow. At the far end, his flashlight revealed another carving in the wood paneling. Smaller, earlier. His stomach twisted. By the time night fully settled, the house had grown colder. The quiet deepened until it rang in his ears. Elias sat at the kitchen table, back straight, every sense tuned outward. He kept expecting footsteps, or breathing, or a knock from inside the walls, but nothing came. Instead, memories did. They arrived uninvited. Half-formed impressions of long summers, of running barefoot through trees, of being called inside at dusk by a voice he couldn't quite place, of standing in this kitchen, shorter, watching dust motes spin in amber light. "I don't remember this," he said aloud, forcing the words into the open. The house creaked softly, settling. Sleep came reluctantly, claimed on the couch with all the lights on. When Elias dreamed, it was of ceilings, beams stretching endlessly overhead, names multiplying across them in different hands, different depths. He woke before dawn with a stiff neck and the distinct sensation of having been watched. The flashlight lay on the floor beside him, switched off. Upstairs, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't name, he returned to the bedroom. Morning light crept weakly through the grimy window, illuminating the beam where his name was carved. There were more letters now, not just his full name but dates, years spanning decades, some crossed out, some underlined deeply, as if emphasized by anger or desperation. At the far end of the beam, barely visible, was a final line carved smaller than the rest. "Welcome back." Elias stepped away, heart pounding, understanding blooming slowly and terribly. The house didn't just remember him. It had kept him. Whatever part of him had been here before, whatever had carved those names and left those photographs, had never really left. And as the floor creaked beneath his feet, adjusting once more to his weight, Elias realized the quiet wasn't empty at all. It was patient, waiting for him to remember the rest.